The sun had only just begun to rise over the shimmering waters of the Sea of Galilee when the first villagers stirred. The hills were still wrapped in a soft mist, birds chirped hesitantly from olive trees, and fishermen pulled in their nets from a long night's labor. A golden light filtered through fig leaves, warming the fields and rooftops of the sleepy countryside. But already the word was spreading, from lips to ears, from towns to pastures, like a breeze catching dry grass. Jesus is here. He had healed the sick, touched lepers with tenderness, opened the eyes of the blind and the ears of the deaf. He had spoken of love that stretched beyond boundaries and a kingdom that lived not in palaces, but in the hearts of the meek. People didn't just admire him, they were drawn to him, as if something in their soul recognized something eternal in his eyes. So they came. Some brought the sick on blankets. Others carried their children or led the blind by hand. Entire families packed what little they had: water, bits of bread, olives, dried figs. They walked dusty roads, barefoot and determined, not knowing how long the journey would be, only knowing they needed to find him. By mid-morning, thousands had gathered on a hillside that sloped down toward the sea. It was green and wide, dotted with wildflowers and soft grass. The air smelled of salt and sun, and the sea sparkled like a sheet of glass. Jesus stood not on a stage, but on the earth itself, surrounded by people who had nothing to give him except their presence, their listening hearts, their aching hopes. He looked at them, not with the gaze of a preacher or a king, but like a shepherd watching over his flock. He knew their burdens. He saw the man hiding his twisted hand, the widow clutching her only son, the Roman soldier standing at the edge of the crowd, uncertain, curious. He saw the rich mingling with the poor, sinners and saints, skeptics and seekers. And he welcomed them all. When he spoke, the wind carried his voice far and wide. He spoke of the kingdom of God not as a distant idea but as something near, living, ready to bloom within them. He used stories about farmers and seeds, about coins lost and found, about vines and shepherds and mustard seeds. His words reached even the smallest child and the oldest elder. People leaned in, mouths open not just in wonder but in hunger. Not for food, but for meaning, for truth, for something bigger than their broken world. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. People shaded their eyes with their hands, squinted at the sky. Children grew restless, their stomachs empty. Mothers shushed babies. A father tore a piece of bread in half and gave it to his son, pretending he wasn't hungry himself. Even the disciples were growing uneasy. "Master," one of them finally said, "it's getting late. This is a remote place. Maybe it's best to send the people away, so they can go into the nearby villages and buy something to eat." Jesus turned to them not with panic but peace. "You give them something to eat," he replied. The disciples exchanged glances. Was he serious? Feed thousands of people with what? "Even if we worked for months," another said. "We couldn't afford enough bread for each person to have even a bite." Jesus didn't argue. Instead, he asked gently, "What do you have? Go and see." So they did. They wandered among the people, asking quietly. Most had nothing left. A few had small bundles, but not enough to offer. And then they found him. A boy maybe 10 or 11 years old. His hair was messy, his tunic dusty. He clutched a small cloth bundle his mother had wrapped for him. 5 barley loaves and 2 dried fish. It was nothing. And yet, it was something. He looked up at the disciples with wide eyes and handed over his meal. No hesitation. No bargaining. Just a small act of trust, simple and powerful. They brought the boy to Jesus. "This is all we could find," they said. 5 loaves. 2 fish. Jesus looked at the boy. Perhaps he smiled. Perhaps he placed a hand gently on his shoulder. Then he looked to the sky and lifted the food high in his hands. "Father," he prayed, "thank you." And he broke the bread. He broke it again. And again. And it did not run out. The disciples stood in stunned silence as basket after basket filled with bread and fish. Jesus handed it to them and they handed it to the people. And no matter how many mouths they fed, there was more. Every hand that reached out received something. Every family had enough. Laughter rose across the field. Tears too. People ate not just because they were hungry, but because they had never seen anything like this before, a miracle unfolding quietly in their very hands. The boy watched as his lunch became a feast for thousands. His heart must have swelled with something he didn't yet have words for, something holy. And Jesus, he simply kept giving. When everyone had eaten until they were full, Jesus instructed the disciples, "Gather the leftovers. Let nothing be wasted." They did. They moved through the crowd with baskets and returned with 12 full baskets of broken pieces. More than what they had started with. Evening came. The sun was setting behind the hills, casting a warm golden hue over the sea. People lay back in the grass, watching the sky, not ready to leave. Something had changed. The world had not shifted, but their hearts had. The miracle was not just in the food, but in the generosity, the love, the nearness of God. Some would remember the taste of bread that seemed to come from nowhere. Others would remember the way Jesus looked at them, as if they mattered, as if they were seen. And that boy would remember the day his small lunch became part of something eternal. Heaven had touched earth, not with thunder but with bread and fish, with hands outstretched and baskets overflowing. In that moment, the crowd saw that with Jesus, even the smallest offering becomes abundance. And no one went home hungry.